r/askreddit scary with Mr. GreatStory. Because you like Reddit scary stories, today I brought you the best ones. Like and subscribe now, or she will visit you tonight. What is the creepiest, most unexplained thing you have ever experienced? This was eventually explained, but definitely fits the criteria for creepiest experience. When I was about 7 or 8, I was laying in bed trying to sleep through a brutal thunderstorm. I was the only person sleeping on the second story of a 150-year-old farmhouse. The house creaked and settled, and was thoroughly terrifying to me as a child, so much that I usually slept with the lights on. I just knew there were legions of ghosts and monsters ready to attack me, so this thunderstorm wasn't doing anything for my nerves. I finally got to sleep, but was awakened by deafening thunder. I looked up to see the wall near the foot of my bed with blood streaming down it. All the nightmares were coming true. The problem was, I wasn't allowed to leave my bedroom. My parents had gotten tired of hearing that I was scared. So I laid there all night watching the blood drip down from the ceiling, paralyzed with fear. Finally, morning came and I went barreling out of the room to get my parents. I pictured one of those moments like in It where only I can see the blood, but no, my parents could see it too. It turns out that after 100 or so years, the dark red bricks of the chimney were dissolving, and the dust from them formed a sludge in the rain. I used to work the opening shifts at McDonald's, so I would get up at 3:30 AM to get ready and get there on time. When I was in my kitchen having some cereal, I looked out the window to see headlights pointing straight into the kitchen window at me. It was on a cul-de-sac behind my house. No reason for anyone to be parked at that angle, especially that time in the morning. Whoever it stayed there, as long as I was in the kitchen with the lights on. As soon as I finished eating and turned the lights off to go get in my vehicle, the car watching me backed up and started driving around to my house. When I got in my car, this vehicle was driving past me incredibly slow, about 5 miles per hour. I have never been so afraid in my life. When I was around 5 years old, I woke up and saw a glowing white man-like silhouette pacing back and forth down the hallway, but kind of gliding. Freaked me the fuck out, and I thought I was having a nightmare or something. I told my parents about it the next day, and my mom got a really weird look on her face. My brother had seen and told her about the exact same thing 2 weeks before, and I hadn't known about it. Still weirds me out. I and few friends were playing in the woods, about 6 of us around 10 years old. Somehow a piss break came up and suddenly we were all pissing on trees. Well, out of nowhere some super sketchy guy appears and asks to join us in pissing on trees. He was so distant and creepy and seemed to creep up from nowhere. I just screamed and all my buddies screamed, and we just ran to where our bikes were, near the road. Sure enough, he was there too and just casually getting back into a rusty old van. He seemed so emotionless and cool and the epitome of a sketchy scraggly character. At Wofa, many years apart at the same apartment. Young teen me. I never had much of a rebellious side to me, but my parents didn't want me in their bathroom when they weren't home. They, however, had a fantastic shower as compared to the leaky POS I was stuck with. We'd had a minor spat this particular morning, and they left to clear their heads. That meant it was time to use the fancy shower. Home Alone extravagances are set pretty low when you're poor. Anyway, they'd been gone about half an hour. Then I hear my dad stomp run into their room. He slammed his keys down, checked the answering machine, and I knew he had to have been pissed. So I called out my shower drain was leaking again. Sorry, I'll be out in a minute. Stomp run to the bathroom door, then it just stops. I called out to him, and he starts jiggling and turning the handle like crazy. The door wasn't locked, and he wasn't an invalid at all. So I stepped out, wrapped a towel around me, and began saying what the hell. As I opened the door, I opened it mid-shake, watching the knob turn, and there was no one on the other side. I ran through the apartment, saw that we still had a message, and the front door was still locked. Parents came home 2 hours later. The other one was a happy creepy about 10 years later. I had a cat I adopted that was a real bastard. He would hiss, butt, and claw if you were lucky, bite if you weren't. Or, if you weren't me. He loved me. He'd frequently attack my family members, then hide in my lap and go to sleep. He had a long battle against stomach cancer, and he finally passed. By the time he passed, it was just my mom, and I left in the apartment and she, in her own way, missed him. About 2 weeks go by, and I'm up late one night on WoW. I saw my cat walk down the hallway, so I instinctively reached down to pick him up to my lap. Towards the end he could barely move his hips. Then I felt really incredibly sad knowing that clearly he wasn't there. That was enough to get me to log off for the night. A few seconds after I laid down, I felt a cat kneading right behind my back. I'm a side sleeper. I figured it was my brain messing with me due to tiredness. When I woke up, there was a little indentation on my blanket and a spot that was about 15 degrees hotter than the rest of my bed. I like to think it was him. He was a mean little bastard, but I hope he was happy with me. My grandmother has a ghost cat in her house. She makes her bed every morning and sometimes there are little prints on the bedspread and wrinkles where a small cat laid. She can feel it walking across her bed sometimes. It's been going on for about 20 years. Edit. I just told my cousin I told Reddit this story. She replied, I would feel it jump up and sleep with me every time I slept in that bed. I can confirm other people know about Ghost Kitty. I witnessed a lady jump off a Newport bridge into the Ohio River. She said nothing. No tears. No emotion. I got out of my car on a heavily trafficked bridge, begged her not to jump. After 2 to 3 minutes she calmly looked into my eyes, still nothingness, and jumped. I called 911. Her body was quickly swept about a mile away by the current. She lived. Cops said she broke a ton of bones and was lucky they could get to her in time. I still honk about her from time to time, just wondering why she jumped. Okay, this is the go-to scary story that happened to me. When I was about 10 or 11 years old, I stayed up sort of late. When I got to bed, I was still feeling restless. I pulled all of my blankets around me and tucked myself against the wall. My twin bed was flush with the wall. I was in bed awake for probably an hour when I started hearing a rather unsettling noise. Muffled crying. I focused on it, hoping it was my imagination, or I was asleep. After a few minutes, I needed to see what it was. I turned around in bed to see a woman in a dress standing at the far side of my room, crying into her hands. Her hair was matted, and her clothes tattered. Oh, and she was about 7 or 8 feet tall, crammed under the ceiling. After a few seconds she looks up at me and screams, but it sounded like it was coming from far away. She made eye contact with me, turned around, and walked through the wall. I stayed awake that night. I got a phone call around 2 AM from a private number. I answered it, and a low voice told me the needed help was on the bathroom floor, too sick to move. I thought it was my brother, so I rushed over to his house, and he had no clue what I was talking about. We then both called all the rest of our family to try to find who needed help. No one did. I hope whoever called me that night got the help they needed. I received a similar call and immediately called the police. They tracked it back to a nursing home. It was supposedly an old lady with dementia. Scared the ever-living shit out of me though. I have twice walked in on people masturbating in public. Not sure if that's what you're looking for, but it's definitely creepy. Once on a cruise, I walked into the bathroom and a guy was jacking it while looking at himself in the mirror. The next year, I was at a Cubs game, went to the bathroom during one of the later innings, opened an unlocked stall, and there it is again. Like, at least lock the fucking door. That made no sense to me. I frequently wake up in the middle of the night with hallucinations that take a minute or two to die off. It's usually something like pumpkin-sized spider on the ceiling or a hooded figure in my doorway, but sometimes it gets really strange. One time it was a nest of hornets flying around my room attacking me, which I flipped my shit during waking up the neighbors. I just think of them as dream hangovers, and I'm sure there is a psychological explanation, but I don't know it. My friends and I were visiting a graveyard a couple of blocks away from home on Halloween, because why not? There is a building that restaurants have been going in and out of for years and none seem to stay open for long. The graveyard is basically this place's backyard. On that night for some reason, the lights were on in the building and there was a lady in a pink dress standing in the window just staring at us. There was no restaurant open in there at that time. We all kind of book it, and this lady followed us from window to window like she was gliding, not walking, which made us completely book it. We ran as fast as we could down the road and there is a segment without windows for her to follow which direction exactly we went, but by the time we got to the next set of windows running full speed she was standing there already, watching in our direction. We never made that trip again. When my brother and I were around 4/5 we lived in a house that was about 100 years old. One day we were walking up the stairs when we saw a tall man in a black coat and top hat walk into the living room which was to the left of the bottom of the stairs. A bit freaked out we thought our dad was pranking us so called out for him. Shit. Both parents came out of the kitchen, opposite side of the stairs, and isolated from the living room. I hadn't thought about it for a long time and we never spoke about it. Then about a month ago, my daughter asked if I believed in ghosts, so I told her the story. Literally seconds later my phone bleeps. It was my brother saying I was just talking to partner about paranormal shit. Do you remember the guy in the top hat? When I was still living with my parents, I was downstairs doing homework when I heard my dad shout from the top of the stairs, slow_chameleon, come up here for a minute. I need you to help me with something. So I loudly say back to him, okay, be there in a minute. When I get upstairs, my dad is walking out of the kitchen. I ask him what he needs, and he looks confused. He said he hasn't said a word in at least 45 minutes. I ask my sister, who has been in the kitchen the entire time. She said they both heard me yell, but that my dad never said anything. We are not a pranking kind of family, and I could tell they were genuinely confused by the situation. A few weeks later, I was listening to music on my laptop in the basement. Since I was home alone, I had turned up the volume pretty loud. Computer was connected to some really strong desktop speakers. I was sitting on the couch, reading a book, when I heard the music gets quieter. I glanced at the laptop and saw that the volume dial was suddenly open in the lower corner of the screen, and the volume dial on the sound mixer was slowly but steadily moving down. Apparently someone didn't share my enjoyment of loud music. My uncle still has no explanation for this one. When he was a student, he shared a flat with a couple of friends. One day they were chilling, having a couple of drinks, and intending to make dinner. My uncle got out a glass dish and put it on top of the oven so he could begin preparing food, but got distracted and went back into the living room. Half an hour later he comes back to carry on with dinner. What he didn't realize was that the hob had been on the entire time, and the moment he touched the dish it exploded everywhere. Something to do with the temperature change. Pieces of glass had melted the lino floor, were embedded in the walls on the opposite sides of the room. They were even finding bits of it in the hall for several days after. The kitchen was literally like the fucking Chucky from Matilda, but my uncle didn't have a single scratch on his body. He was standing right in front of it when it went, and the creepiest part is that there were pieces of glass embedded in the wall directly behind him. I was home with only 2 other people in my house, and all the lights were off except for the living room, where we were. The stairway leads into the living room and the dining room, so you can see into the dining room from where we were. The other people in the room were looking at a book when suddenly I had a weird feeling that I needed to look into the dining room. Looked up, and there's this silhouette of a very tall, broad person in the doorway, looking into the living room. This was weird, because first of all, there's no light on in there, so how am I seeing this pitch black figure? And also second, WTF, there's someone in my house. This happened over the course of maybe like 8 seconds. Me looking up, noticing the thing, staring at it, and then suddenly it turned and abruptly went through the wall. Like it literally just went through the wall. I was so fucking confused. I was a kid then, and one of the other people in the room was my younger sibling, so I didn't say anything because I didn't want to scare them. Nobody else has seen anything like this in my house, but we've all had weird dreams involving a younger girl. Nothing involving anything like what I saw, and it hasn't happened since, which is kind of unfortunate. PLS come back. The most interesting thing to me is that I wasn't really scared. It didn't have a bad vibe to it at all. It just felt like it was observing us. Just seeing what was up. He ghost I'll chill with you again. And also once I had a nightmare where at the very end I had been looking into a mirror and saw someone behind me and then woke up staring straight at a mirror that was in my room in front of me. Yikes. I didn't die though. My friend and I time traveled. Or that is the easiest explanation. We were in high school, and he was taking my bus back to my house with me. We get home around 2:45 and my mother gets home around 3 o'clock. We decided to go hiking before my mother could say no, so we left a note on the counter and took off. We took our usual route up the backyard hill, making sure to avoid the crazy people that resided in makeshift homes up there. Climbed some trees for a while, explored a section of the car graveyard we hadn't checked out before, and other typical teenage exploring type stuff. We took a break near the top of the mountain. It was unusually beautiful that day, incredibly green, and there were seriously visible light beams shining down through the canopy. Like seriously pretty stuff. So of course I start running around through the light and decide we should probably start getting back cause my mother was probably gonna be pissed if we missed dinner. On the way back we stumbled onto a pond we had never encountered before. It was small and had a single wooden boat on it. There were also a few teepees around the pond. Not old teepees, they looked ratty and unusable. We decided someone was probably living there and took a new path back home. We climbed down and up an old quarry and dropped off on the main road that leads to my house. We were absolutely filthy and over a mile from my place. We just walked the road back to my house. We arrived home before my mother, which seemed strange, so I threw out the note so she wouldn't know we were out gallivanting. She got home like 3 minutes later wondering how we had gotten so dirty at school. She arrived home at her usual time and we had only been gone a grand total of 15 minutes. We honestly don't even talk about that day anymore. It's too confusing. But yeah, time travel. Thank you for watching. Tell me which one was your favorite. Like, subscribe and hit that notification bell for more. The next video will be even more interesting. You are a legend.